Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. In the previous lesson, we looked at a Plasmodium parasite, and in this lesson, we want to proceed with another parasite which affects humans, called the tapeworm. And as we may remember from our Senior 1 classification, tapeworm belongs to a phylum of flatworms, the Platyhelminthes. Yeah. And there are quite a number of them, but the common ones are the Tinea saginata, which happens to be in the beef. So if you eat cow beef, or from the bull beef, you can easily get Tinea saginata in case that animal is infected. Then we have Tinea solium. This one is from pork. So for those who enjoy pork, you stand a high chance. Yeah, but the hope is we're going to find out how these parasites are spread and how we can stop them. So welcome once again to this lesson. We shall be looking at tapeworm. We shall also be looking at cystosomes and trypanosomes. So tapeworms particularly live in the small intestines of humans, where they attach to the walls of the small intestines using the hooks and the suckers. So when they find themselves into your body, their destination is the small intestines. And then they use sharp hooks for attaching themselves and firmly gripping so that they cannot be detached using or as a result of peristaltic movements of the intestines. So they are intact, and then they keep on growing. Then they use the suckers for sucking the nutrients that the intestines process. So in the long run, it will be competing with you for the same nutrients, and that's how it becomes a parasite. Great. So you can see that lady defecated a parasite. It passed through her anus, and then she was very strong and courageous to pull it slowly, pulled all of it until it came out. So you can see from there a long tapeworm there that she pulled from her body. Great. So let's look at the life cycle. How does this organism reproduce? So when the infected person goes to defecate, especially this what we call the open defecation in the bush, and you have the tapeworms in you, when you pass out the feces, the chances are very high that the feces contain the proglottids. Those are the segments, mature segments, or the eggs of the tapeworm. So as you pass it there, in the leaves or in the bush, the eggs attach themselves there. And then the pigs, you know what pigs do? They can eat the feces, or they can eat the grass, the leaves. The cow also eats these leaves. And that's how these eggs are passed to the intermediate host, the cow or the pig. Then from there, from these animals, the cows or the pigs, these eggs develop into embryos. And these embryos pass through their intestinal walls into their blood system, from which the blood transports them into the muscles, where they finally attach. So in their muscles, in the meat, in simple terms, these cells now develop into what we call the bladder worms. So they grow from the muscles of these organisms. Now that is how we get it. If you eat uncooked meat, or partially cooked meat, or partially roasted, especially this meat roasted along the way. You've seen people buying meat along the way. Sometimes it is not fully roasted. Or at home when it is not fully cooked, and these bladder worms are not dead, the chances are high that you can take into your intestines these bladder worms that will eventually become the tapeworms. So the summary is there. The human beings has tapeworms in their intestines. They go to defecate and pass out the eggs to the vegetation. The animals, the pigs and the cows, eat this vegetation or eat the feces and get the eggs into their intestines. From their intestines, the eggs move into the bloodstream, from which it enters into their muscles. And from there they are called the bladder worms. And when you slaughter this pig or this cow and you don't cook the meat well, or you don't clean the utensils well, you can even cook the meat well, but the utensils used for handling are not cleaned well. The particles, the eggs may still be there. So you can still can still get infected through utilizing those utensils. We are talking about the knives, the buckets and whatever, the plates used. So that's how the life cycle is. And the cycle repeats itself. That's why it's called life cycle. Great. So let's look at how these organisms are able to thrive through their host. One, they have suckers for attachment to the intestinal walls. So this prevents the tapeworm from being dislodged by the host peristaltic movements. I told you earlier on that they have suckers, they have hooks for attachment, and then they have suckers for sucking the nutrients. So they are firmly attached into your intestines, and they cannot be moved away. Yes. So that's one of the strong points they have for survival. The second one is they have resistant stages in their life cycles. So those stages enable them to maneuver through secondary and intermediate hosts to ensure maximum survival advantage. Great. They also don't have some of the parts. For example, they don't have locomotory structures like the limbs. So therefore, their bodies are flat and minimized, so they can fit within smaller surfaces. That's why a very long tapeworm can live within your intestine for a long time without having to cause a lot of inconvenience. So that is one of the adaptations they have. And then they also have abilities to respire anaerobically, given the fact that their habitat, where they stay, there is not enough oxygen. So therefore they have evolved adaptation to be able to carry out respiration without the use of oxygen. So isn't that interesting? Yeah, that's interesting. That's a strong point for them to survive. So you can be asked how these organisms are adapted to live in their hosts. So those are some of the what? Adaptations. Great. So let's move to another organisms. Members, another parasite. These ones are called the systosomes. I know you must have heard cystosomiasis. Yes, so we are going to look at the guys who cause it. So these are also flatworms, and they're known as flukes. And they are parasites that cause bilharzia. The name cystosomiasis comes from two Greek words. Cystos meaning to split, and soma means the body. And then bilharzia is just a recognition title or name. The person who did research about this disease, cystosomiasis, was a German zoologist, Theodor Bilharz. So the name Bilharzia comes from his second name, Bilharz, Theodor Bilharz. So it's a recognition. In future, if you discover something, the world of science can recognize you by naming that discovery after your name. Isn't that great? So please, in future, enter into the science books by doing research and discovering something new. So we are going to look at briefly the life cycle of the cystosomes. Now, these adult flukes lay eggs in the blood vessels, which hatch into larvae. So they lay eggs in the blood vessels, and then these eggs hatch into the what? Into larvae, the second stage of development. And this larvae penetrate through the walls of the intestines or bladder, sometimes causing bleeding. The adult flukes lay eggs in the bladder or intestines. Remember, one of the symptoms of bilharzia is passing urine which contains blood. You pass blood urine. That is one of the symptoms or signs of bilharzia. Now you know the reason why. You know why? Because the larvae penetrate the larva, causing bleeding in your bladder. The eggs are then released either through urine or feces. As you urinate, you are passing those eggs into the outside or into the water. And in water, we have snails. So these snails are penetrated by these eggs. The eggs of the cystosomes penetrate the snails. So within the snail, they develop into another larvae called the saccharia. The saccharia, which later leave the snail's body and go back to the water. When a person is bathing or swimming, he gets infected in the water. The larvae burrow through the skin and reach the blood capillaries. One can also drink the larvae through, if you drink water which has the larvae, the saccharia, it goes into your blood capillaries. So within a few months, the larvae develops into adult flukes, which come to rest in the bladder or intestines. And then the cycle repeats. So simply, when you go to the water bodies and you are swimming, even in the swimming pool, you have to be careful. Some swimming pools are not well cared for. The snails might be there. And you drink this water or bathe with it. So when you drink, you are taking the larvae, the saccharia. This saccharia will enter into your bloodstream and eventually enters into your bladder or intestines, from which it will cause bleeding of your bladder. You begin urinating, passing urine that has blood and so on. That's when they will realize that you have bilharzia, when the signs begin showing. And as you're urinating, that urine already has the eggs. Yeah. So I still urge you can still get this bilharzia even from the toilets at school. If you have waterborne toilets and one person is suffering from bilharzia, it is possible to spread. So it's good to flush the toilet every time before and after use. So that is how the life cycle is. You can see from there a much more detailed one. Great. So let's look at how we can control the bilharzia, cystosomiasis. One, of course, boil all the water for drinking and even bathing, especially if you are living in an area which is having a lot of snails. Don't even trust water for bathing. Sure, especially if it is from the well or from the lake. Don't trust. Proper disposal of feces and all human waste, urine and so on. Please urinate in the right place. Don't urinate in the bush. It can rain and that water is taken to the lake, and if you are suffering from bilharzia, you're already spreading it. Urinate in the right place and also defecate in the right place. Kill snails using chemicals in case you have a lot of them in the environment. You can spray them. Treatment of water in the swimming pools. In future, you'll be going to swimming pools to relax and so on. Please ensure that the managers regularly treat that water. And then drain water around your homes, because this is what the snails like. Moist environments. Great. So at least now we can control schistosomiasis, and we know how it is spread, and we also know its life cycle. That's great. Let's look at the trypanosomes, the fourth parasite today we are looking at. The trypanosomes. I hope you also remember trypanosomiasis. Yes, the sleeping sickness. So we are looking at the members that cause it. So these are protozoans living in the bloodstream. These are blood parasites as well, and they have different types. But what is important is that they cause the following diseases: sleeping sickness called trypanosomiasis. This is common in Africa especially. This affects human beings. And then Nagana in cattle, you remember that one, and you've been told about it several times. Then we have the Chagas disease. Chagas disease is similar to sleeping sickness, but it's majorly found, it's caused by Trypanosoma cruzi, and is majorly found in America. About 21 countries in the Americas, North and South America, have the infestation of this disease or these parasites. But at least these days, a lot of research has been done and medication, so the prevalence rate is very low now. So Chagas is just another form of sleeping sickness, but it is caused by another species of Trypanosoma called Trypanosoma cruzi. And then the sleeping sickness of Africa and Madagascar is caused by Trypanosoma mansoni. So great. We have sleeping sickness caused by that member there. It is that one is the vector. It is the vector. The sessile is the one that spreads it. Remember, a vector is an intermediate host. It's an intermediate what? Host. And then a human being, in this case, is the definitive host for the trypanosomes. So great. Let's look at briefly its life cycle. To begin with, the trypanosomes are transmitted by sessile. And I have just told you that these are the intermediate what? Hosts. And they act as vectors, of course, by transmitting it. So when a sessile bites an infected person, it sucks blood from the capillaries containing the trypanosomes. The parasites multiply in the body of the sessile and then migrate to its salivary glands. So after biting you, in case you are suffering from trypanosomiasis, and then the sessile bites you, it gets the infection, the parasites, from your blood, and then takes it into its alimentary canal, from which the parasites now will multiply and increase in number, and then after migrate to the salivary glands, where it can again be spread to another person. So when the fly bites a healthy person, it injects saliva, which contains the trypanosomes, into the blood of the normal person. So this multiply and cause symptoms of the disease, and then the life cycle repeats. So what is important here is that the vector, of course, plays a key role. The sessile is the one which carries this disease from one person to another. After biting an infected person, it picks the trypanosomes and then takes them to another person, and then that's how it is spread. So we shall see later on how we can prevent it, but the most important is we have to stop the sessile in order to stop trypanosomiasis. So in simple terms, you can see from there a much more detailed life cycle of the trypanosoma. We can begin from anywhere. We can begin from the human being at stage 1, where the sessile takes blood from the human being and injects the Trypanosoma brucei, and then the Trypanosoma brucei grows or develops from the human being, and multiplies by binary fusion and enters into the lymph nodes and the blood system, from which it can be picked by another sassafly. So the sassafly picks it by biting another person, but that person who is infected, it picks the trypanosomes and takes it to another person. So in the sassafly, this in its gut or in its mid-gut, the trypanosomes multiply or increase in number, and then from which they will migrate to the salivary glands, where it can readily be transmitted again to another person. So in simple terms, that is how the trypanosoma or trypanosomes are spread. So how do we control them? Like we did in mosquitoes, the only way of controlling trypanosomiasis is by stopping the sassaflies. One, by clearing bushes to destroy the habitats for sassaflies. We know they live in bushes. If you go and rear cows, you graze, you will see very many of them coming to suck the blood from the cow and eventually spreading the trypanosomes. So we clear bushes, that's one. Then secondly, spraying using insecticides. Yes, spraying using what? Insecticides. That is another way of destroying them, of stopping them. Then the other one is sleeping under treated nets. In case you are sleeping in a sassafly infested area, they can even attack you at night. So you sleep under an treated nets to stop them, just like mosquitoes. And then in case there are very many sick people there in an area, we can put that area under quarantine, like it is now with the coronavirus. The place can be put under quarantine by authorities, either government or local government. And then the other way of trapping them is using the fly traps. I have seen them in areas like Bujiri, Mayuge, areas where these sassaflies have been sighted, where they use fly traps. And usually those fly traps have some specific colors that attract the sassaflies, and eventually they get trapped. Yeah, it's an interesting mechanism there. And then in case somebody is found sick, you can treat them. And I think the most effective treatment of recent, there are about 5 drugs that have been used. There is pentamidine, there is suramine, and there are others. I don't know whether they are still used up to date, but those are the major drugs that have been used for treating them. So in Uganda particularly, we have a number of areas that have been found to contain these sassaflies. So from that map you can see the red areas are the high risk areas, and then the green areas are the low risk areas. So from there you can see areas around Lake Victoria, very high risk. The Busoga region of Lake Victoria is high risk. Mayuge, I can see Namayingo and other areas, Busia, up to that side of Kenya, and then other parts of the central part as well, and then the West Albertine area and up to West Nile are also very much prone to sassaflies. I think simply because of the forested area around those places and then the water there. So if you are living near those areas, the risk is still high. So let's not take it for granted. The sassaflies are still there and are capable of causing harm. So thank you very much. This lesson ends us with the parasites, the common parasites that we have. There are very many parasites, but those ones we have looked at are the common ones that we have. So you can also look at many others, but in each of the parasites we majorly look at its classification. We look at the life cycle, then we look at the control measures, especially for O level. Those are the major things we would like you to look at, so that you get enough information about them. Thank you very much. Please stay safe.